Thank you, Chairman, members of the committee. I'm opposed to all three of these bills. I think that they're not particularly well written. With regard to the bump stock ban, I think there's already been concerns raised that it would include commonly used devices that are meant to improve the performance of a rifle, that some people could construe to be rapid-fire devices, and because they're not articulated in the bill, could put people at risk of becoming accidental criminals. The AR-15, also called modern sporting rifle, is the most popular rifle sold in the United States. NSSF says 61% of all rifles sold are AR-15 type rifles. They're incredibly modular, and there are a whole host of improvements that are on the market to improve the performance of these rifles. Now, I understand why you want to ban something like a bump stock or a binary trigger, because that significantly increases the rate of fire. An M16 rate of fire is 800 rounds per minute. Now, that's not sustainable, but that's the rate of fire if it were sustainable. A bump stock might increase that to 400, more than 400 rounds per minute. So what definition do we use for a rapid fire device? Competition shooters could pull that trigger 7 times a second, okay? Where a cyclic rate of the machine gun is 13 times per second. So at what point do you say it's a rapid fire device? I mean, you could argue that the shooter's trigger finger is a rapid fire device, right? Now, I know that the bill specifically excludes trigger components, although a binary trigger is a trigger component, so that's kind of a contradiction there. But there's plenty of other parts to the rifle that could arguably be construed as rapid-fire device. Part of the action is the bolt carrier group, the action spring, the buffer assembly. There are companies that sell a low-mass operating system that by reducing the reciprocating mass within the operating system increases the bolt velocity while simultaneously reducing overall impulse experienced by the shooter with each shot, allowing for faster sight recovery and follow-up shots. Faster, obviously that made the shooter faster. Well, how much faster does it need to be before it suddenly becomes illegal? How do we determine that? And as you mentioned earlier, if I have a laser on my rifle, does that allow me to pick up a target faster? Absolutely. If I have a red dot sight on my rifle, does that allow me to pick up a target faster? Absolutely. Where do we draw the line? How does this bill draw that line? And how does this bill protect people from becoming accidental criminals by making specific performance enhancements to their rifles? Okay. With regard to outright ban of these components, by the way, a binary trigger, first of all, it is a trigger. You replace it, right? That trigger costs in the neighborhood of $400 to $500. If you're going to ask somebody who lawfully bought this trigger to get rid of that $500 part, they're not going to be very happy with that, and I would suspect that there would be a possible violation of the takings clause of the Fifth Amendment to just outright ban of a device like that. However, my main concern is the standard practice of incremental performance improvements on these firearms to make them perform better, which do not in any way, shape, or form make them perform like a bump stock or binary trigger, but yet could easily be construed as a rapid-fire device that could land somebody in jail, weapons confiscated, and a large lawyer bill for something that is not even defined by law. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Wade? Yes, Representative Philippi.
Mr. Chairman, I got an email from a constituent who said that there are a lot of new devices to make the trigger pressure much less that is used in competition shooting. It doesn't make a semi-automatic an automatic, but it makes someone who's a competitor able to fire their semi-automatic more accurately and quickly in target practice. Was that email correct? Is that something that happens for modifications for
I would say that
competition shooting?
in many cases, as soon as a person buys a rifle, the first thing they do is update the trigger, because a mil-spec trigger is pretty awful.
And so I guess the concern with this bill, Mr. Chairman, is that it would bring modifications which make keep a semi. It might include modifications that would make that semi fire quicker, but not automatic. So I do think the language is a problem in the bill. Thank you.
Yes, Representative Knight.
I'm glad you brought this up again, along with Representative Corvese. I think that that's why we go through our legislative process and hash out the language. I think that if we made it clear in the legislation that one pull, one bullet is still legal, no matter how fast you can pull it, that would probably go a long way towards alleviating some of those concerns. I will say this about language. Courts struggle with ambiguity in the law all the time because they're the ones who are entrusted with enforcing it. So it's our job to try to be, as clear as possible with the court system. But we can, there's language is imprecise. The whole exercise of government is imprecise. And so I think we can get there. But we can't get there. No bill will get there with mathematical precision. It's just, for what it's worth.